Don't go to your husband's wake. Go to your sister's house instead. You will see everything there. I received that note on the very day of my husband's viewing. I thought it was a cruel joke, but I still decided to drive by my sister's place. When I opened the door, I froze at what I saw. But before I continue, tell me in the comments what city you are listening from. I would love to know how far my story has traveled. Keisha was 36 years old. In the last 48 hours, her face seemed to have aged more than in the last 10 years. The dark circles under her eyes were deep against her brown skin. Her hair was pulled back messily, her hands were trembling, and her whole body was frozen from the chill of dawn and the weight of grief. She was in the kitchen of her house in a quiet suburb of Atlanta. She was making coffee she wasn't going to drink. The air smelled of funeral lilies, incense, and absence. The house was submerged in silence, a silence that wasn't peaceful, but a deep abyss. Everything was ready for her departure to the funeral home. The black dress, the low-heeled shoes, the shawl Marcus had given her for their last anniversary. She was about to get dressed when she heard the metallic clatter of the mailbox. A white envelope, no return address, no stamp, no postmark, nothing. Just a message written in capital letters with black, rough, uneven ink. Don't go to your husband's wake. Instead, go to your sister's house. He is not alone. Keisha stood motionless by the front gate. She held the envelope in one hand and her shattered soul in the other. She read those words over and over again. She didn't understand what they meant. At first, she thought it was a tasteless prank, one of those jokes that hurt more than 1,000 stabs because they arrive when you have almost no blood left. But the note wasn't a threat or a common mockery. It was specific to her, and it mentioned Tasha, her sister. She tried to think logically. Maybe someone had the wrong house, maybe a nosy neighbor, maybe a cruel attempt to disorient her. But the note had the precision of someone who knew secrets. And something inside her, a voice she hadn't heard since childhood, screamed at her not to ignore it. She stood in the entryway of her house for several minutes, gripping the note tightly. Part of her wanted to tear it up, throw it in the fireplace, and go to the viewing like she was supposed to finish burying her pain. But the other part, the part that had started hurting even before Marcus died, wouldn't let her move. Tasha's house was only 4 blocks away, a small bungalow she had rented after separating from her husband Derek 2 years ago. Keisha and Tasha had never been close. 10 years difference, different lives, awkward silences at every family gathering. But when Tasha got divorced, Keisha gave her a spare key to her house just in case she needed anything. She also kept a key to Tasha's house, just in case. She never imagined that just in case would arrive loaded with poison. With the note in her pocket and a knot in her heart, Keisha looked at the clock. 2 hours until the burial. 2 hours to say goodbye to Marcus. 2 hours to close a chapter or open a completely new one. She grabbed her coat and keys and left without thinking anymore. The November wind hit her face like a slap. She walked fast, as if fearing her own thoughts would catch up to her. She passed quiet streets, manicured lawns, neighbors getting ready for their Sunday, unaware that someone was about to discover a truth that would break her soul. When she arrived in front of Tasha's house, everything seemed normal. The blinds were drawn, the small garden had withered plants, and the mailbox was full of junk mail. Nothing indicated that anything strange was happening inside, but as she approached the door, the smell of fresh coffee stopped her, and something else, a man's cologne, a scent she knew too well. Her heart beat wildly. It was the same scent she had smelled on the pillow, on his clothes, in the car for years. Marcus's scent. It couldn't be. Impossible. Marcus was dead. He was in a cold coffin. Or so they had told her. She dug into her purse. There was the key she had completely forgotten about. With a trembling pulse, she slid it into the lock. The door opened effortlessly, without a single sound, as if the house were waiting for her. Inside, there was no silence. There were footsteps, voices, one female, one male, laughter, the clinking of mugs, a radio playing soft jazz. An ordinary domestic scene, except that Keisha was in mourning and her husband was supposed to be dead. She took off her shoes to avoid making noise. She walked barefoot down the hallway, guided by the sound of silverware and laughter. Suddenly, she stopped when she heard a man's voice saying, "Is there any sugar left? You know I like it sweet." It was Marcus's voice, his deep, smooth voice, without a doubt. That voice that had woken her up so many times with promises, whispers, and lies. "You're going to get diabetes," Tasha replied, laughing. "But come on, I'll make you another one." Keisha held her breath. The world was spinning and she couldn't move. Every step she took was a new wound. She approached the kitchen. The door was ajar, and there she saw them. Tasha, in a housecoat and barefoot, pouring coffee, and Marcus sitting at the table with damp hair, in his pajamas, with that same smile, as if he weren't dead, as if he had never died. She didn't scream. She didn't faint. She didn't throw anything. She just stood there, observing, petrified. Tasha approached from behind and caressed Marcus's shoulder. He took her hand and kissed it. Then, Tasha kissed the top of his head. They looked like a couple who had been sharing mornings, secrets, and beds for years. Keisha took a step back, then another. She bumped into the doorframe. She grabbed the wall. The hallway seemed infinite. The air was thick. Her chest hurt. Betrayal had a sour taste, as if it were burning her tongue. She left the house without closing the door. She walked barefoot on the pavement until she reached the corner. There she stopped, leaned against a street lamp, and looked at her hands. They were shaking as if they belonged to someone else. She wondered if she was dreaming, if it was a nightmare caused by grief, if at any moment she would wake up in her bed and Marcus would ask her if she wanted tea or coffee. But she didn't wake up. Cars passed by as if nothing was happening. Birds sang. The city was still alive, just like her husband. Meanwhile, at the cemetery, the coffin was being lowered. Marcus's mother was sobbing. His brother was reading a poem. Friends were leaving flowers. And Keisha wasn't there because Keisha had discovered the truth, or a part of it. She returned home walking slowly, her feet dirty, her stockings torn, and her soul torn to pieces. The driver was waiting for her at the door with a worried look. "Are you all right, Mrs. Van? Do you want me to take you now?" She looked at him, unable to answer. She went inside, locked herself in the bathroom, and vomited. Then she sat on the floor, crying in silence. Marcus was alive, and he had been with her sister this whole time. The story everyone told, the death, the hospital, the sudden illness, the death certificate. It was all part of something darker, something she still couldn't fully comprehend. The phone started ringing nonstop. Her in-laws, her sister-in-law, friends. No one understood why she wasn't at the burial. No one knew what she had seen. She turned off the phone. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling for hours. She remembered every word Marcus had said in the last few months. The excuses, the absences, the change in his tone, the silences she had attributed to stress and that were now clearly signs. And she had ignored it all. At 5 a.m, she read the note again. "Don't go to your husband's wake. Instead, go to your sister's house. He is not alone." Who had written it? Who knew the truth and had decided to warn her? And why? She got up and looked out the window. There was no one on the street. But for the first time in her life, Keisha understood something. Death isn't always the end. Sometimes it is just the beginning of hell. Morning came without her having slept a wink. The image of Marcus alive, drinking coffee in Tasha's kitchen, was branded into her mind like a photograph she couldn't stop seeing, even when she closed her eyes. There wasn't a single tear left in her chest. She was dry, empty, but alive. And the idea of being alive after they had buried her while she was still breathing, buried her under a betrayal, made her get up off the floor. She turned on the hot water tap without thinking, almost without feeling her body. With every step through her house, she found memories. A mug with their initials intertwined, an old note on the fridge, the jacket he had left on the sofa before his death. The air still smelled of him, the smell of a man who had laughed at everything. The phone vibrated on the dining table. 43 missed calls, all with recurring names: mother-in-law, sister-in-law, cousins, friends. The messages said the same thing. "Where are you, Keisha? Are you okay? You didn't come to the funeral. Everyone is waiting for you at the cemetery." She picked up the phone, took a deep breath, and recorded a voice message with a fragile tone, as if she were still in shock. She sent it to Marcus's family group chat. "I'm so sorry. I fainted this morning. I'm back home now. I'm okay, or I think I am. Thank you for worrying." She turned off the phone. She showered with cold water. She dressed without haste, wearing nothing black. She put on a blue dress, the one Marcus hated because he said it made her look too serious, exactly how he didn't want to see her. Before leaving, she looked at herself in the hallway mirror. The woman who had mourned her widowhood for 3 days was no longer there. Now, standing in front of her was someone else, someone who was beginning to understand that love doesn't die, but lies can kill. She left the house without a fixed destination. She walked several blocks as if her feet knew where to go even if she didn't, and found herself in front of the cemetery gates. She stopped. She wasn't ready. How can you be ready? Inside, a headstone with her husband's name awaited her. A headstone without a body, without a soul, without truth. She entered. The gravel path took her directly to the new section. There, amidst fresh flowers, wreaths still damp with dew, and a temporary marker, was Marcus's supposed grave. She stood there, unable to get close. She felt that if she took one more step, she would be accepting a lie. But if she walked away, she would lose the only physical proof of the deception. She walked toward the marker and looked closely. The engraving was done hastily. Marcus's full name, Marcus Emmanuel Dunn. The dates, 1979 to 2023. That year, that month, that lie. A soft breeze stirred her hair. She felt cold despite the warm sun. She knelt in front of the grave. She didn't cry. She only thought, who did they bury here? Because if Marcus was alive, it meant there was another person underneath. A stranger. A stolen corpse. She looked around. The cemetery was almost empty. In the distance, a groundskeeper was cleaning another grave. Further away, an older woman was placing flowers on a headstone. Keisha decided to approach. There was something familiar about the woman, as if she had seen her before. "Excuse me," Keisha said, not knowing exactly what she wanted to say. The woman looked at her without expression. "You are the wife of the young man they buried yesterday." Keisha nodded slowly. "Yes." The woman observed her with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. "You weren't there. Everyone noticed. There were many rumors. Some said you had fainted, others that you didn't want to come." Keisha didn't know how to respond. She wanted to tell the truth, to scream it, to tell that woman what she had seen at her sister's house, but she couldn't. "No, I wasn't feeling well," she said simply. The woman finished placing the flowers on the neighboring grave and sighed. Sometimes, when a wife doesn't go to the funeral, it's not because of the pain, it's because of the truth. And the truth, child, always comes to light. And she walked away. Keisha stood in silence. That last sentence gave her a chill. Had she said it at random? Or did she know something? She went back to the grave. This time she bent down and touched the dirt. It was soft, as if it wasn't well compacted. She was puzzled. She wasn't a gardener, but she had been to enough funerals to know that by the next day, the earth was usually harder. And then she noticed something. A white carnation, perfectly placed in the center of the grave, not part of the other bouquets. It was alone, and underneath it, a small, crumpled piece of paper, as if someone had left it on purpose. She unfolded it. There were no letters, just an old photo. A photo from her wedding. Marcus and her smiling, hugging young, and with eyes full of promises. On the back, written in black ink, "Promises aren't broken, they are buried." Her heart stopped. She looked everywhere. There was no one nearby. Who had left that photo? Who knew so much? She put the paper in her purse and walked away. Her legs were shaking. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to wake up, but she didn't. She called a rideshare and told the driver to take her to the funeral home that had handled everything. She didn't know why, but she needed answers, details, holes in the story, something to tell her she wasn't going crazy. The funeral home was open. A middle-aged woman, looking like she had too few hours of sleep and too many tears, attended her behind a counter. "How can I help you?" she asked, polite but mechanical. "I am the wife of Marcus Dunn. I wanted to ask some questions about his service." The woman's eyes widened as if she were seeing a ghost. "I am so sorry. A terrible loss. Your husband was very young." Keisha nodded. "Yes. Could I see the file? I just want to make sure everything is in order. I have to settle some legal matters." The woman hesitated, but pulled out a folder and placed it on the counter. Keisha reviewed the documents. The death certificate, the hospital corpse number, the transfer, the authorization for cremation. Cremation. "Yes, you signed the authorization as stated here," the woman said, pointing to a paper. Keisha froze. She had never signed anything. She had never authorized it. In fact, she remembered asking for an open casket, but at the hospital, they told her it wasn't possible due to the condition of the body. She looked at the signature. It was her name, but not her handwriting. "Can I take a copy of this?" "Sure. Is there a problem?" No, it's for the lawyer. Thank you." She left with her heart about to explode. In that moment, she knew. Everything had been planned. Marcus hadn't just faked his death. He had forged documents. He had built a perfect story. And someone in that funeral home, in that hospital, or both, had helped him. That night, Keisha didn't go back home. She checked into a small hotel on the outskirts of the city. She needed to think in peace, without fear of a knock on the door, without seeing Marcus's shadow in every corner. She sat at the desk and grabbed a notebook. She started writing. Who signed the cremation permit? Whose body was in the casket? Who left the note on the day of the wake? Who left the photo on the grave? What does Tasha know? She kept writing, question after question. Each one was a loose thread, and she, although broken, was going to start pulling on all of them. Before sleeping, she remembered things she had ignored for months. The late-night calls, leaving without explanation, the weekends he claimed to have meetings, the change of password on his phone, the evasive looks when they talked about the future, the excuse that it was never the right time to have children. Everything was there. It had always been there. But love, damn love, had blinded her. She turned off the light, and for the first time, she didn't cry. Marcus hadn't just faked a death. He had killed the love Keisha had given him. Now only empty ashes remained. And Keisha didn't plan on staying in mourning. She planned to unearth the truth, even if she had to do it alone, even if it was the last thing that destroyed her. Keisha returned to her house just as dark clouds began to cover the sky, threatening rain. She carried the copies of the funeral home documents. She had read them at least 5 times in the taxi, but she still couldn't assimilate their implications. Not only had they forged her signature, but they had incinerated a body that most likely wasn't Marcus's. Who was in that box? Who had helped make that farce look like a tragedy? She entered, locked the door, and didn't turn on any lights. She walked through the dark house, feeling the walls, caressing the furniture, as if looking for an explanation in them. She crossed the hallway and stopped in front of the door to Marcus's home office. She hesitated a few seconds before opening it. He had always been jealous of that space, his corner, his world. He never allowed Keisha to clean in there. He said he would do it, although sometimes weeks went by without him moving anything. Every time she got close, Marcus raised his voice with that soft but firm tone he used when he wanted to set a boundary. That insistence now seemed more than suspicious. The door creaked as it opened. The office smelled of old paper, ink, and something else. Something stale, like moisture trapped between secrets. Keisha turned on the desk lamp. Everything remained the same. The laptop closed, the architecture books carefully stacked, the pens perfectly aligned in their holder. Everything was too perfect, too clean, as if he had prepared his absence down to the smallest detail. She began to rummage through the drawers, work papers, old contracts, project blueprints, receipts, nothing she hadn't seen before. She opened the last drawer of the desk, the deepest one. There lay a wooden box she had never seen, hand-carved with an antique latch. It wasn't locked. When she opened it, she found a thick black notebook, hardcover, no title, no name, nothing. She took it with both hands. She felt the object burning, as if it had a pulse of its own. She sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and began to read. The first pages were full of loose phrases, disconnected words, dates, figures, but as she advanced, the content became darker, clearer, more real. Phase 1. Create emotional distance, reduce physical contact, avoid deep conversations, excuse work stress. Phase 2. Normalize absences, frequent trips, night meetings. Phase 3. Build alibis. Use T as an intermediary. The family won't suspect. Keisha felt a sharp pain in her stomach. Her sister's initial was there, black on white. It wasn't a suspicion. It was proof. A confession written with the coldness of a surgeon. She kept reading. There was an entire page with notes about hospitals, names of doctors, private clinics, contacts. Search for legitimate death certificate, necessary bribe, St. Jude Funeral Home, verbal agreement closed. Do not mention Keisha. Deal only with me. She turned the page and found something that turned her stomach. T. Not sure. Says we should wait. I told her the moment is now. Emotionally, Keisha is vulnerable. It is the perfect opportunity. Underneath, a date. September 7th, 2 weeks before Marcus's fake death. She slammed the notebook shut. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She wanted to scream, but not a single word came out. He had planned it all. It hadn't been an impulsive decision. It was a project of disappearance. And her sister was part of the plan. It wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was a premeditated emotional crime. She put the notebook in her purse, got up, left the office, and went straight to the hall closet. She grabbed a raincoat and an umbrella. She was going to find more answers. She headed to the neighborhood where Tasha lived. The sky was unloading a constant, annoying drizzle, as if wanting to erase the world's tracks. She walked through the streets like a silent investigator, observing the faces of neighbors, windows, doors. She wanted to talk to someone, anyone who might have seen them together. She stopped in front of the small convenience store on the corner. There, a woman of about 50 was arranging boxes of fruit. Keisha approached. "Good afternoon. Excuse me, do you know Tasha, the one who lives in the White House on the corner?" The woman looked her up and down. "Sure, you're her sister." Keisha nodded. "Yes. How long have you known her?" "Since she moved in, after her divorce, about 2 years ago." "And have you noticed if anyone visited her frequently?" The woman wiped her hands on her apron and lowered her voice. "Look, I don't like gossip, but since you ask, that tall man, dark hair, a bit of a beard, he came every night. Sometimes I left late and he was still there, and sometimes he was already there in the morning. You could tell he lived there. She never introduced him to me, but you didn't need to guess. They were a couple. You could see it from a mile away." Keisha felt a lump in her throat. "How long have you been seeing him around here?" "Oof, honey, for months, maybe 6 or more." "And are you sure it was always the same man?" The woman frowned. "How could I not be? The cologne he wore, I don't forget it. The same one my husband used before he left me. Those smells stick with you." Keisha thanked her with a whisper of a voice. She kept walking. She knocked on a neighbor's door. An elderly woman with a curious look opened it. "Who is it?" "Hi, I'm Keisha, Tasha's sister. I just wanted to ask if you saw a tall, dark-skinned man visiting her often." The woman interrupted her before she finished. "Ah, the one with the gray SUV." Keisha froze. "Yes, that one." "Well, yes, we all thought so. He arrived every night around 10 and left at 6 in the morning. Sometimes he was gone for days. I haven't seen him for a few weeks. I thought they had argued or gone on vacation. I don't know. He was your husband, right?" Keisha swallowed hard. "No, he isn't anymore." She said goodbye quickly. She couldn't listen anymore. Every word was a stab wound. Every testimony stole her breath. She stopped in front of Tasha's house. She didn't go in. She didn't knock. She didn't want to see her. Not yet. But she needed something. She crossed the street and went into the small bakery where they used to buy treats as girls. She approached the counter. A young man served her kindly. "Hi, what can I get you?" "How long have you been working here?" "About 2 years." "Do you remember a woman named Tasha? She lives right across the street." The young man nodded. "Yeah, the one with the garden. Sometimes she comes in here with her partner." "Have you seen them lately?" "Last week. They came in together. He ordered a coffee and she ordered bread. They sat here for a while. They spoke quietly, but they didn't seem distant, comfortable." "Do you remember if he ever came alone?" "Yeah, a couple of times. Once he came in to buy her flowers. I asked if it was his wife. He told me no, not yet." Keisha felt her legs weaken. "Do you have security cameras?" "Yeah, but the recordings are deleted every 5 days." She nodded. There was nothing else to ask. She left, soaked, and walked to the St. Jude funeral home, the same one that had handled Marcus's service. She entered with the determination of someone who has nothing left to lose. This time, an older man attended her, probably the owner. "How can I help you?" "I want to ask about a service you did a few years ago. No, not Marcus Dunn's. Another one." The man looked at her suspiciously. "Under the name of Derek Webb, about 2 years ago, her ex-husband died." The man consulted a record book. He frowned. "Yes, Derek Webb. Heart attack, direct service, everything very quick." "Do you remember if Marcus Dunn was involved?" "That name sounds familiar. One moment." He got up and went to a file cabinet. He came back with another folder. "Here it is. He paid for everything. He was the primary contact, despite not being immediate family." Keisha staggered. "Are you sure?" "I'm not mistaken. He even came himself to bring the medical certificate." That was months before Marcus's death. Keisha stood in silence. The world was spinning again. Marcus had been involved in the burial of Tasha's ex-husband. Before faking his own death, before appearing in her kitchen, before destroying everything, she left the funeral home. This time she wasn't crying or shaking. She walked in the rain as if nothing could get her wetter than she already was on the inside. The black notebook was the map of hell, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it, even if no one was left alive when she discovered everything, even if she had to crawl through ashes and lies, even if her own blood was stained. Because at this point, the only thing worse than the truth was continuing to live in the shadows. The silence of the early morning was only broken by the drumming of rain against the windows. Keisha couldn't sleep. The black notebook remained open on her bed. On the page where Marcus detailed the participation of a doctor with the initials AC, it wasn't hard to guess who it was. The same signature appeared on Marcus's death certificate, and also on Derek Webb's, Tasha's ex-husband. The same name, the same slanted handwriting, as if signing deaths was a routine for him. Keisha knew that this doctor wasn't a simple pawn. He was part of the machinery. She got up, still in yesterday's clothes, and searched the internet for the doctor. His name was Dr. Arthur Clay, a general practitioner specializing in emergency medicine. He had a small private clinic, but also worked at the hospital where Marcus's body had supposedly been taken. He had a valid license, no public complaints, but something made her shudder. He had signed more than 17 death certificates in the last 3 years, all related to patients with no known family or with distant relatives who never appeared to claim the bodies. The pattern was clear. Someone needed bodies without voices, without history, without faces. and this man provided them. Keisha jotted down the details in a separate notebook. She didn't want to keep using Marcus's. That one contained his lies. She needed to build her own truth. The next day, she went to the cemetery where, according to records, Derek Webb was buried. The sky was still gray. In her pocket, she carried a small garden shovel. She didn't plan to dig up a corpse, but she wanted to confirm something with her own eyes. She searched for grave 417B. It didn't have marble or a metal cross, just a simple cement plaque with his name, dates, and the phrase, "Rest in peace." The place was isolated near the cemetery wall. No one else visited that section, not even passing through. Keisha observed the earth. It wasn't compacted. In fact, there were signs of it having been recently disturbed. The grass, which normally grows over time, barely peeked over the edges, as if the burial had been a few days ago. She crouched down and sank the shovel into the ground. It slid in easily. There was no lime seal, no cement, no gravel, nothing used in permanent graves. She knew it then. That coffin was empty. Or if it contained anything, it wasn't Derek. It was impossible. Everything was too similar to Marcus's situation. She heard footsteps. She got up quickly, hid the shovel, and pretended to pray. A groundskeeper walked by and shot her a suspicious look, but said nothing. When he walked away, Keisha took photos with her phone, focusing on the soft earth, the still fresh flowers, and the lack of an official marker from the city. Everything served as proof. She decided to go to the county probate court. She needed to confirm if Derek, before dying, had made any changes to his assets. She introduced herself at the office, pretending to be a close friend, and provided the Social Security number she had taken from Marcus's notebook. After nearly 2 hours of waiting, they handed her a simple copy of the last will and testament registered by Derek Webb, dated a month before his death. She read it carefully. There was what she feared. Derek left everything to Tasha: a house on the coast, a savings account, and a life insurance policy. Before that date, his only heir was a nephew living overseas. The change was too sudden, too convenient. Keisha stopped at a clause. The will was witnessed by an estate attorney named Lawrence Pike. She looked him up online. Surprise. He was the same one who had validated a special power of attorney that Marcus had granted to a person with a vague name, RGH. Who was it? A straw man? A fake identity? The pattern could no longer be ignored. Doctors, lawyers, funeral homes, a network, a structure that allowed faking deaths, hiding bodies, erasing tracks, and in the center of it all, Marcus and Tasha. That night, Keisha couldn't stay at home. She felt the walls watching her. She went out to walk aimlessly until she ended up in a small bar downtown, one of those places where no one asks questions. She ordered a coffee and sat at a table in the back. She took out her notes and began connecting the lines. She used a red pen: Marcus, Derek, Tasha, and in the center, the word money. "Always so serious, huh?" said a voice that made her look up. An older man with gray hair and small eyes stood in front of her table. He wore a gray jacket and a hard expression. He didn't look like a customer. He didn't fit in the place. "We know each other, don't we? Or we should. I'm Jerome Webb, Derek's brother." Keisha swallowed hard. There was no record of a brother. She thought he had no close relatives. That's what they said at the funeral. "But no one asked me." Jerome looked at her intently. He sat down without being invited. "I know who you are, Keisha. I know about Marcus, about Tasha, and I know you're not crazy. I have questions, too. Many. Why show up now?" Jacinto took out a folder: photos, documents, copies of messages. "Because I've been investigating my brother's death for 2 years. I never believed it was a heart attack. He was an athlete, he was healthy, and because when I saw the photos of your husband, I recognized his face. He was the one who introduced himself as my brother's lawyer. I saw him, I confronted him. He said he was his financial manager. Then he disappeared. A few days later, Derek died." Keisha felt her heart drop. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I tried, but I had no proof, just a hunch. Until now." He slid a photo toward her. A photo taken from afar, blurry but clear enough. Marcus entering Tasha's house. They were holding hands. The date was 3 months before his death. What do you want to do? The same as you. Expose them, but not just anyway. We have to do it so they can't hide. If they are burying people alive or stealing identities, this goes beyond our families. This is a criminal ring. Keisha looked at him with distrust, but also with need. She couldn't do it alone anymore. I need to know if Derek is really dead. I have a contact at the morgue. Tomorrow we can confirm if his body passed through there or not. If it never arrived, your theory is right, and we aren't looking for ghosts, but accomplices. Keisha accepted, not out of trust, but out of desperation. That night, she returned to the hotel with a strange mix of strength and nausea. The idea that Tasha had killed Derek, or worse, that Marcus had assumed his identity, was no longer an exaggeration. It was a possibility. Before sleeping, she opened the black notebook again. She read a page she had previously overlooked. Next phase: clean accounts, close cycles, start over with a new name. Everything is ready with T. The rest depends on the opportune moment. That new name left her thinking, what if Marcus was no longer Marcus? What if he had supplanted Derek or someone else? She looked at the ceiling. The echo of her own breathing was the only thing keeping her on this side of madness. Because now she knew there wasn't just one fake burial, there were two. And probably soon there would be more. That idea repeated in Keisha's mind like a sentence. The nights became endless, eyes open to the ceiling, going over the connections, the faces, the words written in her notebook again and again. Marcus hadn't faked his death just to escape her. There was something darker, colder behind it. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a pattern, a system, a network. The next morning, Jerome picked her up in front of the hotel. He was carrying a folder. Keisha opened it as soon as she got in the car. They were copies of emails, printed text messages, surveillance photos. In most of the images, Marcus appeared, or the man she believed to be her husband. In some, he called himself Alvaro. In others, Cesar. In several documents, he appeared with a driver's license under the name Rodrigo Mendez. Where does all this come from? A woman contacted me a few months ago, Jerome replied, eyes on the road. She said she knew him as Rodrigo. He introduced himself as a widowed businessman with a daughter in Europe. He asked her for money for a real estate investment. When she started to suspect, he disappeared. How did you find her? On a forum for romance scam victims. I opened it out of desperation. I didn't think anyone would answer. Keisha examined one of the emails the woman had sent Jerome. It contained screenshots of a conversation, phrases identical to the ones Marcus had said to her for years. No one has ever understood me like you. Only you make me feel alive. I just need to fix a family problem, and then we'll be together forever. It was like watching a play repeated for different audiences. Jerome handed her a number written on a napkin. Call her. Her name is Simone. Keisha called from a payphone. The voice on the other end sounded sure, firm, with a calm forged from ashes. Hello, Keisha. I was waiting for you. They met in a quiet coffee shop, far from downtown. Simone was a woman of about 40, elegant but unostentatious. Her gaze had the hardness of someone who has seen too much and learned to doubt everything. When he told me his wife had died of cancer, I cried with him, Simone began bluntly. He took me to a fake grave. He brought flowers. He kissed me while he cried. He made me believe his pain was real. Keisha said nothing, just listened, picking up the pieces of her own story in every word. He asked me for $5,000 to invest in a plot of land. He showed me papers, blueprints. Everything looked legal. I never thought it was a scam until he vanished. Where did you meet him? At a Chamber of Commerce event. He introduced himself as Rodrigo Mendez. He said he had a construction materials company, said he had just moved after his wife's death. Keisha took out a page from the black notebook and showed it to her. That name was on Marcus's contact list. Simone read it carefully. This Charles L. Renee mentioned him, said he was his trusted architect, but I don't know if he really existed. They spent the afternoon sharing details. Simone showed photos, bank receipts, emails. Each one fit like a piece of a much larger puzzle. Before saying goodbye, Simone said something that left her frozen. "There's another one. Her name is Renee. She's a private investigator. I hired her after Rodrigo disappeared, and she already knows about you." Keisha bit her lip. "What do you know about her?" "She will look for you. She is gathering evidence to report him. She has access to bank movements, images, wiretaps. She doesn't just want justice. She wants to sink him, whatever it takes." That night, Keisha slept only 3 hours. The next day, she received a call. Unknown number, a cold and professional voice. "I'm Renee. I know who you are and I know what you're looking for. Are you willing to go all the way? There is no turning back." They met in an apartment with sealed windows and drawn curtains. Renee had everything laid out on a table: folders, hard drives, USBs, printed photos. He has used at least 5 identities in the last 8 years. He has faked his death twice. He has maintained relationships with 3 women at once and has moved money to accounts in Panama, Uruguay, and Switzerland. Keisha couldn't believe it. "Do you have proof?" "I have everything necessary to destroy him. I'm just missing one thing, your testimony." Keisha handed her the black notebook. Renee examined it with analytical precision. "This is gold. It contains dates, names, routes. It is a criminal's logbook." They spent hours organizing the information. For the first time, Keisha felt useful. She wasn't just the betrayed wife anymore. She was part of something bigger. Renee took out a thick file. Inside were copies of bank transfers. One of them caught her attention. A large amount sent to an account in Tasha Van's name. Keisha felt her feet freeze. "How much?" $10,000, transferred a month before Marcus's death from an account associated with Rodrigo Mendez. "The insurance." "Look at this." Renee handed her a copy of a policy. Marcus had named Tasha as the sole beneficiary. Date of issue: 3 months before the fake accident. Cause of death: traffic accident. How did he get it? "The payment is frozen. An alert popped up for possible fraud." Keisha closed her eyes, took a deep breath. When she opened them, she wasn't the same. "Let's report him." "Not yet," Renee stopped her. "We will build the case. We will leak it to the press. We will expose them all. Marcus, Tasha, the doctor, the lawyer, the funeral home. If we attack them legally, they will hide. But if we make them public, they will have nowhere to crawl." Keisha nodded. Jerome arrived shortly after. When he saw all the gathered information, his eyes misted up. "I never thought we would get this far." Keisha looked at him. "And we haven't even started yet." In the following days, they created a joint archive. They organized every piece of evidence in digital folders. They made backups. They contacted an independent journalist. She agreed to listen to the story with skepticism, but upon seeing the documents, her face changed. "This is dynamite, but I need more. I need an interview." Keisha accepted. They recorded in an anonymous room. Her face partially hidden, her voice trembling at first, but as she spoke, she regained her strength. "My husband faked his death. My sister was his accomplice. What they did isn't just a betrayal. It is a scam, an emotional, legal, and moral crime." The journalist, Alicia Cross, promised to release the report in 2 weeks. She asked them not to leave the city. That night, Keisha received a text message. Unknown number. "I know what you are doing. Stop digging. You don't know who you are messing with." She smiled for the first time since it all began, because now she knew he was afraid, because now she was the one moving the pieces. Keisha no longer hesitated when she spoke. Her steps were firm, her gaze direct. There was no room for hesitation. Marcus's betrayal had broken her once, but the new Keisha wasn't made to suffer. She was made to expose monsters, and she wasn't going to do it alone. The next morning, she met with Jerome at the office of a lawyer specializing in criminal law. Jerome had managed to convince his parents, the parents of the late Derek Webb, to start a legal process and request the exhumation of the body buried as their son. Keisha stayed on the sidelines during the meeting, but her presence was key. She had gathered enough evidence to document the irregularities, and now, finally, justice seemed to begin turning against the lie. "With this," the lawyer said, showing the file they had assembled, "we will request a court order to verify the identity of the corpse. We need forensic evidence, and a judge with half a brain will grant it to us." Keisha felt vertigo, but also a glimmer of hope. If they managed to open that grave and confirm that Derek wasn't inside, they would have a bomb in their hands. The story would change not only for her, but for all the people Marcus and his web of shadows had touched. That night, in her apartment, Keisha poured herself a glass of wine. She was reviewing the documents for the umpteenth time when her phone rang. Restricted number. She answered with caution. "Hello?" A raspy male voice. Low. "There are truths that kill, Keisha. Let the graves stay closed." And he hung up. Keisha left the phone on the table, trembling. She ran to close the windows and check the deadbolts. The threat was real. It wasn't paranoia, it was a warning. She called Renee, who answered instantly. "I just received a threatening call." "Don't answer any more restricted numbers and come to my house. It's safer. I have cameras, an alarm, and private security. Don't risk it." Keisha packed a bag with the essentials and left. The wind outside whistled, as if it also knew something dark was approaching. She walked quickly to a main avenue and hailed a cab. During the ride, she thought about the ease with which Marcus had created identities, moved money, lied. But what hurt her most was how close she had been to him for years, without seeing who he really was. Upon arriving at Renee's apartment, she was received with a silent hug. Words weren't necessary. Both knew that crossing the line from secret investigation to public exposure made them a target. "You're safe here. For now," Renee said. That night they slept with the lights on. The next morning, Keisha was reviewing the documents again when she saw something she had overlooked. An almost insignificant receipt in the name of the doctor who had signed Derek and Marcus's death certificates, Dr. Arthur Clay. Next to his signature, a small logo of a clinic she didn't know. She looked up the clinic online. Checking its contact page, she discovered something disturbing. Among the members of the board of directors was the name of the attorney, Lawrence Pike, the same one who had handled Marcus's will. Keisha took a deep breath. She needed to confirm. She kept digging. She found an old article from a university magazine. A black and white photo showed 3 young men awarded for a medical legal project. Arthur Clay, Lawrence Pike, and a third whose face was none other than Marcus's, under the name Stephen Gray. Another alias, another disguise. They were college classmates, Keisha told Renee. This network was built a long time ago. It's not a coincidence, it's a system. Renee looked at her seriously. And you are in the center. That afternoon, while they were coming back from getting groceries, Keisha noticed something strange. A dark van parked in front of the building. It wasn't from the area. It had no front license plate. As she passed in front of it, she felt someone watching her. She didn't want to look directly, but fear settled back into her chest like a sleeping animal waking up with rage. That night, they reviewed the security cameras. At 3 a.m, someone had tried to force the building entrance. They hadn't succeeded. The alarm had sounded, and they had fled. But it wasn't a common thief. He wore gloves, a ski mask, and hadn't taken anything. Renee reported the incident. Keisha felt the noose tightening. They were close to something they couldn't allow to come to light, and she wasn't going to back down. The next morning, a white envelope with no return address appeared in Renee's mailbox. Keisha opened it with gloves, as Renee had taught her. Inside, a paper with a single sentence. Marcus is not the only one. There are more like him. Renee looked at her without surprise. I told you, this goes beyond a relationship. We are uncovering a pattern. Men who live off lies, men who disappear. They steal lives, identities, inheritances. They are specialists. They are emotional predators. Keisha felt a mixture of terror and determination. It was like an invisible jungle, and she unknowingly had entered armed only with love. The hearing for the exhumation was set quickly thanks to the lawyer and the media pressure that Alicia Cross's upcoming report was starting to generate. Derek's parents attended with sad faces, but with unbreakable dignity. The judge listened to the arguments, reviewed the evidence, and finally signed the order. The grave will be opened in 5 days under forensic supervision and with all parties present, he declared. Keisha left the courthouse with her heart beating as if it wouldn't fit in her chest. She had waited so long for this moment that now she feared what she was going to discover. Jerome caught up to her outside. If Derek isn't in there, everything changes. Keisha nodded. And if he is, too. Days later, at the cemetery, the earth was removed before the judge, the family, the appointed medical examiner, and several court officials. The coffin was extracted. Keisha felt like she was running out of air. The judge ordered it opened. Inside was a body, or what remained of it. But the examiner, upon examining the remains, gave the first revelation. The dental records do not match. What does that mean? Keisha asked. That this body is not Derek Webb. It belongs to another person. The judge ordered an immediate investigation. The scandal didn't take long to explode in the media. Wrong body exhumed, funeral home under suspicion, series of mortuary scams. Those were just some of the headlines Keisha saw from a distance. She didn't celebrate. She knew this was just the beginning. That night, in front of the mirror, she said to herself in a low voice, "I'm going to find you, Marcus, even if it costs me my life, even if I have to go down to hell with you." Because the truth wasn't just under the ground. It was in the silences, in the fake names, in the crossed signatures, in the empty graves, and in every lie that was now starting to rot under the light. The media smelled blood like sharks in the ocean. The scandal was unstoppable. The exhumation of the wrong body uncovered a web of corruption, identity theft, and fraud involving inheritances, life insurance, and wills. Keisha, contrary to everything she had believed, became the